Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. Alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN, I am Darren Kinnard. And Matt, it's a sad couple of days for us here as we record on Friday mornings.
Yep.
2 days left in the basketball season. Our season for our teams actually ended on Monday night in the Supers, but bottom line, at the end of Saturday night, basketball season's over. The winter sports are done, and it's on to spring.
Yeah, and Monday seems like a lifetime ago at this point.
It does.
But yeah, I love high school basketball. Southern Illinois has made me love it. When I came here, I liked it, and now I love it after 8 years here. It's just fantastic. But it's so probably my favorite time of the year is coming to a close. But as you mentioned, it's been over since Monday for us.
Yeah, and so Meridian was the last area team, and we went through that explanation of area versus regional, that type of thing. So Meridian was our last area team, still alive. They went to the Eastern EIU Super Sectional in Charleston to face Effingham St. Anthony. Meridian traveled great, but Effingham St. Anthony had a huge contingent because they were 35 minutes away.
Yeah.
And so great atmosphere. And things got away from Meridian late in the half. They're down 17 midway through the third quarter. But if this postseason has taught us anything, no lead is insurmountable when the Bobcats are involved. And they came storming back, even took the lead in the fourth, but ended up falling in overtime. But what a tremendous effort, and it ended up being quite a game.
Yeah, and it was obviously, for someone that wasn't there, tough to find a stream one way or another. But following your updates and everything, it was oh, man, yeah, well, it was a great season. Wait, hold on a minute. Hold on. And it made you feel like going to overtime, it was like, man, yeah, they could do it. But obviously they lose by 4 points. And, just a fantastic effort by the Bobcats. Past couple years, honestly, for it to not end in a first-place trophy feels wrong this year. But, that there can only be one. And so we wish they could have made it to this weekend, but it is what it is. Super sectional appearances are rare, and so they should be very proud of what they did. Obviously, they were aiming to return, but still, this was a fantastic season for the Bobcats, and just as a Southern Illinois resident, I couldn't be prouder of them.
And they finished 26-9 at third straight sectional title, and even if you go back a little bit to Friday night, which was after we had recorded, that game against Goreville was a fantastic sectional final, and again, regional final Friday is one of my two favorite work days. We've talked about that. Sectional final Friday is tremendous just because of the level and then the atmosphere and all the things. And again, Cobden was a tremendous host. I think that had they played that game at Southern, there would have been 2.5 times the amount of people that actually went to the 2A Super that SIU hosted. And that's just, really more of a statement on, people in this area. Most of the schools were done other than those two, and you want to go see a good game, and that was a great game.
Yeah, it was, but because I saw several people saying, well, they should have flipped 1A and 2A, but as you mentioned, Effingham St. Anthony was right down the road, so they're sitting there saying, well, hold on a minute, what about us? And so, you're not going to please everybody, and the IHSA is trying their best to do that, and also it gives EIU a chance to show off their facilities, and there's a lot of moving parts here. As I mentioned last week, when they first came out with it, I thought it was going to be 1A, 2A flips sites every single year. I thought that would be a great idea. Didn't go with that idea, and so it is what it is. Maybe they can find a way for next year the 1A to be a little bit closer to home, but I don't count on it at this point. But at this point, we hope and pray that 2A produces at least one of our area teams going to the Super at SIU next year.
Yeah, and look, the folks at SIU definitely want to hope that because with Altoff and T-Town, which T-Town has a great following, and certainly they're familiar with the road to Carbondale, having been down it many times in this very spot. But Altoff does not have a big contingent of fans, and so they were hoping to get to 2,000. And then at midday, it was like, I don't know if we're going to get to 1,500, and it ended up less than 1,100. And so clearly, if we would have had one of our immediate area teams make it, or even if Bree Central makes it, I think the numbers would have been tremendous. Yeah. And so then you move that to what happens. You end up with a bunch of private schools that win, and in 1A through 3A. 8 of the 12 are private schools, and so that made it to state, and then Peoria Manual's in open enrollment, so they're public, in parentheses or quotation marks, and so the attendance has not been great at state this weekend, and some would say, well, that's the bed they've made.
Kind of, yeah, but at the same time, you hope that because kind of football finals also, it wasn't nearly as bad as attended, but you kind of looked at it and said, I think IHSA might finally have their wake-up call. And now with the basketball finals also having the same situation, I think that, they're kind of starting to say, maybe we do need to do something about it. And, obviously you don't want to water it down. You want to find your best and everything. But I don't think you water it down too much by saying if you're a private school that you go into a different playoff system entirely. I don't think you water that down one bit. Because then you're putting everybody that's played by the same rules into the same system, kind of. And I don't see how it would be a bad thing per se. It'll be more to keep up with, but when you get down to it, I think everyone will be where they should be at then. And I don't think it's too complicated of a system, especially in basketball, to figure it out.
Well, and I think that the one step that they've made to this point is that the enrollment will be decided every year.
Yeah.
And I think that's a small step, but I think it is a step.
It's an important step.
And then I think that it will be interesting over these next couple of IHSA board meetings to see what comes out. We're hearing that there's going to be some changes into the way the enrollment is figured for the private schools, and maybe some, the waivers that they can apply for. It's going to be tougher to get those waivers and those type of things. But at the end of the day, those are really only going to affect the 1, 2, and 3A, because in 4A, look, if you put in you're a private in 4A, where are you going to go? There's no fifth class, and so that'll be interesting to see how that transpires. But I hope that they give it the opportunity to do something, let it work, and then, or see where we're at, see what adjustments can be made. Because I felt like if you go back to, that early to mid 2000s, when they put the multiplier in, they didn't give it enough time to work and to tweak and to do those things. And then they immediately went to 4 classes. Right. And now that genie is out of the bottle. It's not going to go back in. And, and honestly, what that has done is it's created maybe a worse atmosphere.
I would say so.
When you look at 9 or 8 of the 12 in 1 through 3A are private, when only 25% of the schools are private, that's got to be adjusted. That can't continue. And this isn't, there are people out there that, the privates need their own thing. I want to see them, adjust the enrollments to do the things first. Right. Because when you immediately go to a separate private public, that seems like that should be the last resort.
I agree. As you mentioned, they're going to be trying some different things. I think you got to give that 3 or 4 years time to see how it all shakes out at the very least. But I do think that if it doesn't work, what's the next step? I think that becomes the next step. At least I think you'll, at that point, the villagers will have reached the door at that point where if you don't do this, there's going to be some major issues.
Well, and again, I will go back to the fact that there are 3 times as many public schools as there are privates.
Yes.
And this is a member-driven organization. This has been pointed out many times. And what that means is that the changes to the bylaws as far as amendments, things like that has to come from the grassroots level, from the school level, and then it gets voted on by the membership, which is the schools. Yep. And the fact that there's been nothing that has been able to get through and to get passed, that's on the public schools. Don't complain. Right. Get it right. If that's what you want, then make it so.
Well, all they have to do is really just go back and watch Schoolhouse Rock and find out how a bill is made, because it's essentially the same process, just at a much smaller level. And instead of a bill, it's an amendment. And I mean, you got to do the work. You can't just put it out there. Like, you got to do the work. You got to hold the town halls, as we've talked about in past podcasts. Get the support, and there will be plenty of support. But the thing is, you also got to let people know the townhouse. Right. You can't just say we're going to do one, and then no one shows up, and you say, well, what could have been? You got to let people know about it. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it could potentially be done by the end of this year if even one school says, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm going to put the work in. It's going to take maybe a couple hours out of my week still, but by the end of it, it'll have been worth it. But until someone says that, out of the 700-800 some member schools, you would think one of them would, but none of them have stepped forward to do it. You would think someone would, but it is what it is.
But it's easier to complain.
It is very easy.
But so here's the thing. Let's use Althoff as an example.
Sure.
Their enrollment is 288.5.
Yeah.
Which again, that's because it's a 2-year average. That's how you get the half. They don't have a half kid. So even with first of all, they are 2A by, I believe it was three people in the enrollment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is weird because in the 8 class system, they're 1A.
Right.
And then in the 4 class, they're 2A. But even with the multiplier, they're 2A.
Yeah.
Even if you went to a larger multiplier, say, hey, if you're private, you're going to have to double your enrollment. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? They still would be 2A.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so it will be interesting. I've heard some of the solutions are potentially, if you're a private school, then you're going to be a class up.
Yep.
And that the waivers that you apply for will be potentially tougher to get. And again, it will be interesting to see if this is what comes out of it, and then what will the teeth be behind it. These will provide some interesting fodder for conversation here in the coming months.
Yes. Well, and excuse me, as much as we talked about all this, as we said before we started the podcast today, this all came from the pandemic regulations and everything, that the IHSA tried to do the right thing in finding a solution for everything. But the thing is that everything is basically coming up here at the end of the school year, that not just the waivers and everything. The video streaming that everyone seems to complain about, if the schools aren't out of it yet, they will be at the end of this year and stuff. So, there's a lot of things that it takes some patience and a little bit of work from other people, as we keep mentioning. But yeah, it will definitely create interesting conversation. It won't really affect us so much, but it'll affect the region, obviously, with a Belleville and some other schools like that. But with the waivers and everything, it'll be very interesting to see. And it will definitely create then conversations about, the fact that, they thought they were going to be down here, but they're up there or whatnot.
Right. Well, and the one thing that we can guarantee, at this point in time here in mid-March is that, it wwon't be enough for many.
No.
It'll be too much for the rest.
Of course.
And we'll just have the constant bickering back and forth about it. But again, I think that even those that are fully supported, just get better. Well, you can't just sit and say that when there's 2/3 of the representatives. I think that's cause for alarm.
Yeah, the public schools deserve to be represented in some way, and when they're going up against superpowers, sometimes they can only do so much. They're given what is in the community, and that's not to knock on any community, obviously.
No.
But a private school or a public school with open enrollment,
right?
They can kind of pick and choose and say, we got some kids in the backyard, but there's also this kid that's in our boundary, non-boundary that we can take. And that's
the other part is that, look, this is not to say that there's not recruiting that goes on in public schools.
Of course.
We all know that would be a false statement that it doesn't happen. So again, it's there's going to be no perfect solution, and so it's about finding a solution that is as good as it can get. And so when you look at it, St. Anthony went to Champaign. Lost 56-50 in the semifinals to the Chicago Hope Academy. The game was not that close. St. Anthony closed the game on a 21-4 run to get within 6. And that was with a lot of their starters still in the game. And anyway, it wasn't that close. They lost to Peoria Christian this morning in the 3rd place game, so St. Anthony ends up 4th. Althoff wins its semifinal game against Christ the King. De'Air Hill Jr., spectacular, 22 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists lead the way. So now it's Althoff into the championship game against Chicago Diet, a team that we saw in the Centralia Holiday Tournament.
Right, yes.
And I think there were 3 Centralia Holiday Tournament, maybe 4 that were that made the Final Four. So that's really kind of a tip of the cap to the folks at Centralia.
Yeah, seriously.
But Althoff playing for this championship, that'll be on Saturday afternoon at 3. And think about this. Althoff has a chance to that would be their 3rd state championship of the year. They obviously won football.
That's right.
They also won boys soccer.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be 3 in 1 year. I don't know that, again, this might be recency bias. I'd have to do the homework. I don't know that I've seen 2.
Yeah.
And those are like, white rhinos.
Yeah.
But, that's 3 in the same year is incredible for a school of 288.
Right, exactly. And they're following all the rules that they're supposed to be following. So it's not, to our knowledge at least. I mean, they're getting places that, and they're just like, we'll play it here, it's not a big deal. So, but yeah, that would be amazing. I mean, it's only a 50-year history that you have to go through. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't. It's not a lot, really, when you look at it. So,
I mean, to win 3 in the same year would just be
insanity.
Would be
and I mean, well, unfortunately, that's great for Belleville Althoff, but unfortunately for everybody else, they'll look at them and be like, how is that fair? And I can hear their complaints and understand where they're coming from,
too. Absolutely. So the last thing that I want to talk about is not necessarily a pleasant topic, but as we put basketball to bed for the season, the one thing that I want to address here is, and this is a problem that I saw all year. It's something that we've seen get worse over years, and that's fan behavior. Yeah. And what I saw in multiple places this year, was just not good. In person, social media stuff, blasting officials, blasting coaches, blasting teams, whatever. It's just it's bad, and it's just and that's an oversimplification for it. But in the past few weeks, even. I've seen, fans yelling at players on the floor. I've seen, you have the traditional people that are going to scream and yell at the officials.
Of course.
And first of all, I'm not sure. I get emotion.
Of course.
I mean, and I get when I watch my team play, I always think that everything's going against them. But I'm not sure that the guy sitting at the top of the bleachers. What are you accomplishing by screaming at the ref? You're not working the officials like coaches. No. And if nothing else, human nature, and not that any official has ever said this to me, but human nature, for me personally, if there's a 50-50 call, I'm not going to give it to the one that this guy's acting like a moron.
Sure.
And now here's the thing is that, there'll be people that watch or listen to this and go, oh yeah, that's that fan. Just stop.
There's a lot.
Every fan base has idiots.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm appalled by some of the stuff that I heard and saw in person, and then also what I've seen on social media, especially in the last 2 weeks. It's disgusting, and it has no place. Adults, be better. Be better. That's the only thing I can say.
Well, I mean, you got to remember the players are kids. Even if you go to the college realm for these, I mean, those are still young men, young women. Like they're still getting their lives figured out. And then in terms of the referees, they're not going to get any better. I mean, I know that there's been some people that are not fans of the way that games are called these days, and part of that's because of referee shortage, and they're still learning all the rules. There's a lot of handbooks out there that are not just a couple pages thick. It's a hefty thing, and there's a lot of new refs out there that are trying their best out there and trying to make the right calls. And obviously, a wrong call is going to make things go one way other than the other way, obviously. But you got to give a little bit of grace here. I mean, especially here in Southern Illinois, we're known as people that are very neighborly, that give grace.
Except on Friday nights.
And I can understand.
And some Saturdays.
I can understand the emotion and the fire, but there's a right way to do things. And, yeah, the stuff that we've seen at every level, I mean, I think it's reaching down. I don't go to junior high to Pee Wee ball stuff.
I've heard it's worse.
That's what I was going to say. I understand that it's just as bad, if not worse. And so you got to remember, these are kids. It's not going to be the end of the world. Obviously we want our teams to win. I get that. But I mean, we've got a PSA running on ESPN about fan behavior for the past year or two, and just about how, this is just we're supposed to be learning lessons in these things. The kids are learning lessons, life lessons. Not everyone's going to make it to the NBA, to the NFL, and it's what they're taking from it, and we should be supporting that in every effort. Obviously, we want the team to win, but, give the refs a break also.
Well, and it's the other thing is that, when you watch the way things unfold in a particular game, and and everybody is up screaming and hooting and hollering, and that everybody includes the 10-year-old kids in the stands. And so what have they learned?
Right.
They've learned that, that our team is getting screwed is why we didn't win. And so we're going to boo. And then, what they become? They become the kids that howl and scream every time there's a foul called. And it's just brutal to watch. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And this will be, and I'm going to end it on a positive note. This is what made Nashville such a pleasure to watch for me. Nashville's girls. First of all, Dempsey Whitty on the sidelines, very calm, cool, and collected. And again, as we're watching the state championship game, look, do I want to see Nashville win? Absolutely.
Of course.
Okay. But I'm not a fan, so I don't have media. I don't have the same vested interest as, all the blue and red faithful behind me. Okay. I felt like they were getting the short edge of the whistle.
Sure.
Okay. It looked like there has to be much more contact at one end than the other to get the whistle.
Yeah.
Okay. I watched Dempsey's reaction on the sideline and the way he talked to officials. And then the carryover from that was you never saw his kids scowl. You never saw his kid. They just kept their head down and they just freaking played.
Yep.
And they played well. And so when everything seemed to be going against them, it didn't matter. They still controlled that game and beat the snot out of a very good team when, again, if you let the officiating, if you let the atmosphere, if you let that affect your game, it wouldn't have necessarily been that way. But again, so it was such a contrast to see. And I'm not saying, Nashville's crowd was yelling and hooting and hollering, right? That's what crowds do. But I'm talking about the behavior of the coach and the behavior of the players. And again, that was the carryover. And again, just adults need to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
that's all I can say.
That's who everybody looks to when it comes. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a 30-year-old adult, if you're a 70-year-old adult, or somewhere in between. People are looking at you at every moment and saying, "Okay, how are they acting? Okay, well, if that's how they're acting, then obviously I can do the same." So it's a matter of having the integrity, and then also from, you're talking about Nashville and Dempsey Whitty and just how quiet but confident they were. I mean, it shows a lot of confidence in a team right there. Obviously the players and the coach, but also from a fan base. If they sit there and say, okay, that's what you want to call, that's fine. Obviously, you're going to have some that are going to be hooting and hollering. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. But again, have some grace and have some confidence in your team to come on out. They don't need to get all the calls to get a win.
Right. And then, and I lied. I'm not going to end on that. So, and that's, that's the thing. We've got the microphone and that's, we make the rules. So, when you look at that, the emotion and the things that go into it, and then you go home and, if you're in the car, and this goes down to peewee level, you're going to, and if you're a parent and you're bad-mouthing the umpires, the officials, the coaches or whatever, you're not helping your kid at all. No. Because now they think that the coach, the referee, and all those people are not worthy of respect because mom and dad said they suck. Yeah. And that's a problem.
Yes, it is.
And then I'm gonna quote Herman Edwards here. Don't press send. You want to get on your phones or your computers and type up a bunch of nasty stuff. Don't press send. Yeah. Just stop it. And look, I've in the last week I've seen a bunch of racial stuff. Mm-hmm. Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
For crying out loud, if we haven't gone past, and I don't want to hear the yeah buts. Well, they did this. Or, again, all fan bases have morons.
That's correct.
And that doesn't mean that you need to be a moron to match them.
Right, exactly. Be better. Always be looking to be better than your neighbor, basically, and in a good way, not not in being like, I'm so much. No,
my car's nicer than yours.
Exactly. No, just find a way to be better, and then hopefully your neighbor also looks and says, well, if they're doing that, just like I said, someone's always watching. Make sure that when you're being watched and when you're not being watched also, it's again, it goes back to integrity.
Right. And again, it just escalates because if you say this, well, then somebody's going to say this. And it's that social media monster that's created. Okay. We'll put that to bed for now.
Get off the soapbox.
Big news from this week.
Yes.
Was we talked about dominoes when the Mississippi Valley, broke up, when we saw Mascoutah and Triad go to the Southwestern Conference. We saw Civic Memorial in Jersey going to the Cahokia. That left Waterloo and Highland as the only ones out there. Waterloo appears to also be going to the Cahokia. They have a board meeting on Monday, but it also puts into some wheels into some other conferences, and we saw that come to fruition this week. Something that I think that was kind of common sense. Mm-hmm. It made a lot of sense that this was going to happen, and then it did. Salem is coming to the River to River, Ohio, to be the 6th team, and all these conference moves start 26-27, so not this coming year, in 2 years, but now the Mississippi Valley Conference is no more, and so it's given its life. So that other conferences can create full and better opportunities to
make sense. And
now Salem into the Ohio, there's a full complement. 6 teams. Yep. No more of this, odd non-conference in the middle of the football season, which is an AD's nightmare.
It is.
To try to schedule. They now have their 6th team, and it's a team that a lot of people have felt that they fit here for a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen also people say, well, that's going to be a long haul for it's going to be fine for the most. I mean, a few years ago, we had the same people that I saw complain about the distance for Salem in the Ohio, same people I saw saying, well, what about Mount Carmel, which would be an even worse trip. Right. So it's going to be difficult in travel in some aspects, but you know what? It could be a lot worse, and it makes sense. Salem wouldn't be going if they didn't feel like they could make it work for all of their athletics on a Tuesday night, perhaps, like I saw some people mention. So it's going to be
right.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. It's going to be completely fine.
Here's the thing: Salem in their current, in the Cahokia, Mississippi, it is an hour 25 or hour 35 to Roxana. About the same trip to East Alton Wood River. Yep. It's $1.44 to Columbia. It's $1.46. I looked it up on Google if you can't tell. It's $1.46 to Waterloo. Yep. Guess what the trip to Massac is?
Well, it's about 100 miles.
It's $1.45.
There you
go.
It's
an hour 45. It is no different than so for Salem. It's not really going to be a change. Yes, the trip to Murfreesboro, the trip to Harrisburg is about that same hour and a half. It is not more travel for them.
No,
it is not.
No.
Maybe all told, if you got in there, it might add up to be a little more. Now, for the other teams, the existing teams in the Ohio, yes, on the surface there is. Look, if you're Massac County, going to Salem on a Tuesday night for volleyball is not ideal. But look, this decision was made largely in part for football.
Yes, it was.
And that's the nature of the beast. It creates evenness in schedules for everything else, but this, make no mistake, is about football. When you look at college, those decisions are made for football.
That's right.
This same thing. Massac, where their odd game was for the.
Oh gosh,
do you remember?
No,
Red Hill.
That's right. It was Red Hill.
Red Hill, which is an hour beyond Salem.
Yep.
Okay. Heron. I saw some gnashing of teeth from Heron people.
Prairie Central.
You went to Prairie Central.
Yep.
Okay. Murfreesboro's gone to Madison. Yep. And so it's just.
And I've heard because that contract came up after this year. I've heard that they've been looking and saying, well, who do we? Central Illinois or somewhere in Kentucky.
Right.
Neither is really compared to Salem. Neither is wanted.
And Harrisburg, I think, was. I don't know if that was the conference game, but they went to Alton Marquette.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, when you look at it, that part of it is, and again, I understand a Tuesday night is, but here's the other thing is that you have smart people involved here.
Yes.
Okay. If that's a problem, then start scheduling on Fridays or Saturdays.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And look, I understand volleyball. There's a lot of tournaments on Saturday, but nobody blinks an eye at traveling 3 hours for a tournament and then going to go play five matches in a day.
That's right.
And then you're going to travel 3 hours home.
Yep.
And again, volleyball is one of those that plays all three levels in the same night. 5, 6, and 7, is what they schedule. It's rarely that, but it's not ideal.
Most high schools are getting out with enough time for a freshman team to get there, get warmed up, and be playing at 5 o'clock. So, I mean, it's not a huge deal.
And in spring sports, if you think your kids are getting out too early, because now if you're Massac County and you're going to Salem for baseball or softball, and you want to be there an hour before a game that starts at 4:30, then you're going to be leaving at 1:15, 1:30, whatever. If you feel like they're missing too much school, then move it to Saturday.
That's right.
There's just a lot of things that can be done.
Yeah.
This checks a lot of boxes, and again, I've also seen some of why don't they put Salem in the Mississippi? And
it doesn't make sense.
Work like that.
No.
This isn't just about location; it's about enrollment size.
Yes.
And so the Mississippi are smaller schools. Salem fits with the Ohio.
Well,
side.
that's what I was getting ready to say. They actually would be, based on the current numbers, the biggest school in the river to river.
Right.
They beat Heron by, I think, like 4 kids on enrollment.
Right.
But, yeah, they fit in perfectly. The only reason why people are probably feeling that way is because Salem has been struggling the past few years, but they'll come out of it. This is all cyclical. It'll be fine. They make perfect sense. It's the big school division. They're going to make perfect sense, and it will be good games. I think they're going to match up well with some of these teams in the big sports that people watch the most.
And again, at the end of the day, yes, it's a long trip, but it's very easy to get to.
It is.
It's right off the interstate. And really, when you look at, if Salem's going to Murfreesboro, well, you get off in Marion and you go straight across 13 and you get there. Same thing with Harrisburg the other way. So, and Massac's really not that hard to get to.
Straight shot.
It's straight shot down the interstate. So, again, I think the travel stuff, look, people are always going to gnash their teeth about something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, to me, it's better than the alternatives of going with a 5-team conference and then having to pick up some rando that's 5 hours away. Come on.
I think it's a great move. I think, again, it's all cyclical. Salem will come around. They'll be able to match everybody in the conference. They might be ready to match in some of these sports immediately when they join on in. So it'll be fine. Again, they fit right on into the division in terms of size. And, I mean, Heron's already in 3A in all the other sports.
Carterville's close.
Carterville's close. They may be next year,
depending on when the breaks come.
And Harrisburg, Murphy, Massac County, they're going to probably still be the smaller ones, and they may not be moving up anytime soon. But the way that we've started seeing Southern Illinois kind of be a little bit of an influx of population, I wouldn't be surprised if any of those also move up in classes. Not right away, but in next 10, 15 years possibly.
Well, and the other part is that it's not necessarily that they end up with more people.
Yep.
It's the fact that you end up with all these newer schools.
Yep.
And so when all these new schools come in, especially these new privates, and they come in, well, they're all 1A.
Yep.
Well, that pushes everybody up.
Yep, that's right.
And so even though you may not have gained enrollment, you may end up because, there's 10 other new 1A privates, we talked about it. Maryville Christian, I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, me neither.
SIUE Charter. I mean, those are new schools within the last decade, I would think. And so, and when I go through the list of scores that's listed on the IHSA page nightly, and I mean, I don't sit here and proclaim to be able to know all 800 schools or whatever.
Sure.
But there are some of these that I have never, ever heard of.
Yep.
And it's just like, where is that at?
Right.
And so the more of those new schools come in, there's always that possibility. But I just think that they're a good fit size wise. I think that now there's still a couple of pieces because what does Highland do?
Right.
There's an invitation to join the South 7, which again that would even things out.
Yes.
But they're also still talking with the Southwestern Conference.
Yeah.
which that would give the one division in the Southwestern Conference 6, and they would fit in travel-wise. It would be a better fit for them. Yeah. Again, everybody believes Waterloo will approve Monday going to the Cahokia, and again, that's a 3A going into a 4A football. They will go in as the biggest. They will. The biggest school in there. But it raises the level for Bree Central, for Freeburg, for all those, Columbia, and those are all regional teams. I don't know that necessarily helps, Waterloo big picture, but at the same point, to be able to play in a competitive conference, to be able to play in a, one that we're not traveling, 3 hours to get stuff, and it just makes you feel bad. The history, the Mississippi. I always call it the Missouri Valley because it's MVC. It's Mississippi Valley. That's right. Been around since 1971, I think I saw. 70s. So all of a sudden it just blew up. Yep, it's gone. It's gone.
It takes one school to kind of sit there and say, you know what, I'm kind of done with this, and then all the other ones kind of look around and say, well, I have a couple offers, and I'm looking and. Yeah, that's all it takes to force the carousel to start moving. The last thing I'll say about Salem that I'm excited about is just the fact that in terms of color theory, it's a brand new color for the Ohio division, and it's not something that's,
spoken like an art guy.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, because, last time that there was movement, got Carterville, of course, but you lost Benton and West Frankfort, which were both kind of red, maroonish, and so, but you get the orange. We get a brand new color in green here.
The other thing that you get is you get really good facilities.
Yes, you do.
And you get an organization, a school that is used to hosting stuff, and it's a first class operation. Yes. And so I think they are a tremendous addition to the conference. And again, this place used to host the girls' super sectionals. That's there. Right. They've got a midwinter tournament. They host track sectionals. Yep. Their baseball, softball facilities are good as well. Football field is got some new lighting, and again it's not off the beaten path. It's not like you got to go on dirt roads to get to and all this. It's pretty easy to get to, and I think it's a good ad.
And the other part of it also is that it kind of expands your network as a conference as well, because Salem, not off the beaten path, not anything like that, but they are further up north than the other ones, and so you expand it more to they've got their connections with St. Louis and everything. If you're looking for a spot in a volleyball match or something, or a basketball game, we have one more spot to fill. You might call up Salem and say, do you got any ideas of someone I could call that they might actually be like, yeah, I got a couple guys that I know.
And at the end of the day, there are no other options.
Right.
I mean, the only other option legitimately is Breeze Mater Dei, and we talked about the public-private stuff. That ain't happening.
Nope.
The Breeze Central is they're not coming. If anything, they would be a candidate. I'm not saying they are. They for the South 7 before they would be for the River. This is a 3A, 4A type. So I mean, there just aren't many other options. No. And again, you talked about Mount Carmel. I mean, that was the hot topic a few years ago,
3 or 4 years ago.
That from those that have not made that drive, it's a hot topic. But for those that have made that drive, and again, great people, great facilities, whatever. But again, for everybody else, I mean, you're rooting for Mount Carmel to get in, and that's a much further trip than it is to Salem.
And obviously, they have, like Salem, great facilities. They have great athletes year in and year out. But as someone that has made the trip to or near Mount Carmel about 4 times the past month, I don't want to do it. Okay,
you're done, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Let's not add 2 more trips a year for Matt Varney. No, we're not doing it. Okay,
we're selfish here. Yeah. We make no bones about it.
I'd like to go call a game at the Snake Pit once, but that's all I need. That day will one day come.
A playoff game would be fine,
and that day will probably one day come. I don't know when it's coming, but someday it will probably come.
Well, this day has come as we have ranted, we have mourned the end of the basketball season. The fact that it ended on Monday for us means I have to rake gumballs today instead of going to the state tournament. So Those that know my affinity for raking gumballs know that this is a truly sad day for me, and I will be sore all weekend.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story and a whole other topic for another day probably. So, but that's going to do it for this edition of the River Radio Sports Central podcast. The calendar flips to spring as the spring seasons will start on Monday.
Yep.
We will continue to do our podcast weekly, though. We don't stop just because basketball and football are over. We have plenty to talk about, and we'll have plenty to talk about through the end of the spring season. So that's going to do it for us today. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll talk to you again next week.